They say the jungle has no mercy. But today the rules of nature were rewritten in blood and mud. A helpless life was seconds away from being swallowed forever, until an enemy became a savior. You won't believe the choice this lion made. Chapter 1. The Valley of Whispers. The sun was sinking fast over the Valley of Whispers, casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor. It was a time when most creatures sought the safety of the heights, knowing that the night belonged to the hunters. Among the trees, a lively troop of monkeys moved with practiced grace, leaping from branch to branch in a synchronized dance of survival. In the back of the group was Koda, a young monkey whose curiosity often outweighed his caution. While the elders focused on finding a nesting spot, Koda's eyes were locked on a rare, shimmering dragonfly. It darted through the underbrush like a spark of blue fire, leading him further away from the safety of the troop. He didn't notice the change in the ground beneath his feet. The lush green moss began to give way to a damp, dark soil that felt unnaturally soft. The air here was heavy and smelled of ancient decay, a warning that the forest was hiding a trap. But Koda was focused only on his prize, his tiny heart racing with the thrill of the chase. With one final leap, Koda missed the dragonfly and landed hard on a patch of black earth. Instead of the solid thud he expected, there was a sickening squelch. The ground didn't hold him, it opened up like a hungry mouth. Before he could cry out, his legs were buried up to his knees in thick, freezing mud. Panic immediately took hold. Koda thrashed his arms, trying to grab onto a nearby fern, but the plant uprooted instantly in his weak grip. Every movement he made seemed to lubricate the sludge, allowing it to climb higher. The Black Mirror, a hidden pit of volcanic mud, had found its latest victim. His high-pitched screams finally reached the troop. His mother swung down to the lowest branches, her face a mask of absolute terror. She reached out her long arms, but she was too far. The ground around the pit was a death zone. If she stepped on it, she would be swallowed alongside her child. The rest of the troop gathered in the canopy, a chorus of frantic shrieks echoing through the valley. They watched helplessly as the mud reached Koda's waist. The forest, usually so full of life, suddenly felt like a tomb. The more Koda struggled, the more the earth seemed to tighten its grip, pulling him down into the cold dark. As the light faded, Koda's strength began to fail. His tiny chest was heaving and tears tracked lines through the grime on his face. He looked up at his mother one last time, his voice failing as the weight of the mud began to crush his spirit. The Valley of Whispers was about to claim another soul. Chapter 2. The Silent Predator. The frantic noise of the monkey troop didn't just alert the forest. It drew the attention of the valley's most feared inhabitant. Deep in the tall grass, a pair of golden eyes snapped open. The great apex, a massive lion known for the jagged scars across his muzzle, rose from his slumber. He didn't move with the haste of a scavenger. He moved with the steady, rhythmic power of a king. Every step the lion took was silent, his massive paws padding softly over the dry leaves. He followed the scent of fear and the sound of distress, his tail twitching with predatory interest. In the wild, a scream usually meant a meal, and the great apex had not eaten in 2 days. As he broke through the brush, the monkey troop went dead silent. The mother monkey froze on her branch, her eyes wide with a new kind of horror. A predator had arrived to finish what the mud had started. The lion ignored the elders in the trees and walked straight to the edge of the pit. Koda looked up, his small body trembling so hard the mud rippled around him. To him, the lion looked like a mountain of gold and muscle, silhouetted against the dying sun. The predator's shadow fell over the pit, turning the black mud even darker. The end was no longer a slow drown. It was standing right in front of him. The lion lowered his head, his hot breath hitting Koda's face. He let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated in the very air. To the monkeys in the trees, it sounded like a death knell. They waited for the flash of teeth, for the sudden end to the tragedy unfolding in the sludge. But the great apex didn't strike. He stood perfectly still, his ears pinned back as he surveyed the treacherous ground. He was calculating the density of the mud, recognizing the danger of the trap. He saw the baby's exhaustion, the way the small creature had given up the fight and was simply waiting for the darkness to take him. There was a strange intelligence in the lion's gaze, a look that transcended the simple urge to kill. He sniffed the edge of the pit, testing the stability of the roots that wound through the soil. He knew that one wrong step would mean his own massive weight would become his downfall, dragging him into the abyss. For a long minute, the king and the captive stared at each other. The predator and the prey were locked in a silent dialogue that the rest of the forest could not understand. The great apex let out a sharp huff of air, a sound that seemed to signal a decision. The hunt was over, but a far more dangerous mission was about to begin. Chapter 3: An Unlikely Mercy. Nature is governed by a set of brutal, unyielding laws. The strong survive, and the weak are consumed. But on this day, in the heart of the Valley of Whispers, the great apex chose to rewrite those laws. He shifted his weight, digging his hind claws into the firm earth several feet back from the pit's edge, anchoring himself like a living statue. Slowly, with a grace that seemed impossible for a creature of his size, the lion began to lean over the mud. He extended one front paw, testing a thick, mossy root that snaked towards Koda. The root groaned under the pressure, but it held. The lion was entering the danger zone, placing his life on the line for a creature that wasn't even a mouthful. The monkeys in the trees watched in stunned silence. They had never seen a king stoop so low. The great apex was no longer a hunter. He was a bridge between life and death. He lowered his chest closer to the grime, his golden fur becoming stained with the foul-smelling sludge as he reached for the sinking infant. Koda was paralyzed. He didn't know whether to reach out or to shrink away from the giant teeth inches from his head. But as he looked into the lion's eyes, he didn't see the fire of the kill. He saw a calm, ancient, steadying force. It was a moment of pure, raw instinct, a recognition of help in its most terrifying form. The lion opened his jaws wide. The mother monkey let out a strangled cry, certain she was about to witness the end. But the great apex was as precise as a surgeon. He didn't bite. He draped his mouth over Koda's shoulder and arm, using his teeth like a gentle vice to gain a grip without piercing the skin. It was the moment of greatest risk. The lion's front paws began to slide forward into the mud. He let out a deep, chest-shaking roar, not of anger, but of immense effort. He was fighting the suction of the earth, a force that had claimed creatures twice his size. The king was refusing to let the valley take his prize. Every muscle in the lion's neck and shoulders bulged, standing out like thick ropes under his skin. He began to back up, his hind legs churning the dry dirt as he sought more leverage. The mud hissed and popped, a sound like 1,000 tiny mouths refusing to let go of the baby monkey's legs. The tension was unbearable. For a few seconds, it seemed as though the mud would win, dragging both the king and the child into the depths, but the great apex refused to yield. He closed his eyes, let out a final, explosive growl, and threw his entire weight backward in a desperate final surge of power. Chapter 4: The Tug of War. The air was filled with the sound of a violent, wet snap as the vacuum of the mud finally broke. It was a victory of sheer will over nature. Koda was pulled upward, his lower half emerging from the sludge with a sickening sound. The lion didn't stop, continuing to drag the boy across the treacherous ground until they reached the safety of the tall grass. They collapsed together on the firm earth, both exhausted. Koda was a mess of black slime and trembling fur, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He lay on his side, unable to move, his small limbs feeling like lead weights. He was free, but the shock of the rescue had left him in a trance-like state. The great apex stood over him, panting heavily, his sides heaving like a bellows. Mud dripped from his golden mane, and his eyes were clouded with fatigue. He had spent more energy in those few minutes than he would have in a full day of hunting. He looked down at the tiny life he had snatched from the grave. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The monkey troop remained frozen, waiting to see if the lion's mercy was a temporary whim, Would he now claim the life he had just saved? The mother monkey crept down to the lowest vine, her heart breaking between the urge to run to her child and the fear of the predator standing over him. The lion lowered his head again, but this time he used his large, rough tongue to lick the thickest layer of mud from Koda's face. It was a gesture of incredible tenderness, a cleaning ritual usually reserved for a lion's own cubs. The act seemed to wake Koda from his shock, and he let out a small, weak whimper. The great apex let out a low, vibrating purr, a sound that resonated through the ground and into Koda's very bones. It was a signal of peace, a reassurance that the danger was over. The lion nudged the small monkey with his nose, gently rolling him over to ensure he had no broken bones from the ordeal. Slowly, Koda found his strength. He wobbled to his feet, his tiny hands clutching at the grass as he tried to wipe the grime from his eyes. He looked up at the lion, a creature he should have feared above all else, and felt a strange, inexplicable bond. They were no longer predator and prey. They were survivors of the Black Mirror. The lion stepped back, giving the baby space. He looked towards the trees, his gaze finding the mother monkey. With a sharp flick of his ears and a commanding huff, he gestured toward the child. He was giving the boy back to his people, his role as a guardian now complete. Chapter 5. The Bond of the Wild. The mother monkey didn't hesitate. She dropped from the branch, scooped Koda into her arms, and scrambled back into the safety of the canopy in a single fluid motion. She clutched her child to her chest, burying her face in his mud-stained fur, her cries of grief turning into soft, hooting sounds of joy and relief. From high above, the entire troop looked down at the great apex. They began a new sound, a rhythmic, melodic chatter that echoed through the valley. It wasn't a warning, it was a tribute. The monkeys were acknowledging the king, honoring a debt that could never be repaid in the currency of the wild. The lion didn't wait for thanks. He turned away from the pit, his movements still heavy with exhaustion. He began to walk back toward the tall grass, his tail swaying slowly behind him. He carried the mud of the pit on his coat like a badge of honor, a mark of a king who had chosen life over death. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he paused and looked back one last time. He saw Koda watching him from the safety of his mother's arms. The young monkey reached out a small hand, a silent gesture of farewell to the giant who had saved him. The great apex let out one final deep roar that shook the trees. That roar was heard for miles. It told the valley that a miracle had happened. It warned other predators that this area was under the protection of a king who valued mercy. The sun finally vanished below the horizon, leaving the valley in a peaceful twilight. The Black Mirror now just a dark spot in a land of light. The story of the great apex and Koda would be told in the silent language of the forest for generations. It would become a legend, a reminder that even in a world built on the struggle for survival, there is room for compassion. The lion had proven that the strongest heart is the one that knows when to be gentle. Koda grew up to be a wise leader of his troop, always wary of the mud but never fearful of the shadows. He often sat on the highest branch at sunset, looking out over the Valley of Whispers, hoping to catch a glimpse of a golden mane moving through the grass. He never forgot the eyes of the king. And deep in the heart of the forest, the great apex continued his reign. He remained a solitary figure, a hunter of legends, but every time he passed the Valley of Whispers, he would pause at the edge of the pit, a silent guardian of a memory where a king chose to save a life rather than take one. Real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have claws. If you're a true animal lover, show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing for daily stories of survival and hope. Don't miss our next miracle. Turn on those notifications.